Number one, learning about the plant. What is cannabis? What is THC? What is CBD? What's my endocannabinoid system? How does this really work? And I was able to do that and really be able to find myself relief in a way that I did not have to take prescription medications. But what I realized is the other side of that is that I had to do the research on why I felt that way. Why did I feel so negative about cannabis? Why was I so scared? Why did I feel like this was something that was illicit and wrong? Whereas, in the 1920s, cannabis was more widely used than Tylenol. So there's definitely been a culture shift around this plant, and I really had to educate myself out of it.
Welcome to the Conscious Solutions Podcast, a podcast and community focused on the alternative wellness space. Here we highlight founders, practitioners, retreat leaders, and innovators who are finding ways to thrive while supporting others in their healing and growth. I've spent the last 8 years as an entrepreneur in this space, building communities, supporting retreat centers, working with educational platforms, nonprofits, and running a wellness society here in South Florida with over 1,500 members. And through that journey, I've seen firsthand how many people are out there doing meaningful work, but often without the business guidance, visibility, or support that they deserve. This podcast is about elevating the people who help the people, sharing what's working, where the industry is shifting, and how we can adapt and grow together. Thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy the conversations to come. There we go.
All right. Live from the dispensary.
Live from the dispensary. I've been checking out the website, seeing what you were up to over there. Awesome. Really, I love the mission and the vision. I really admire the story. And you're not really just building a business, you're reclaiming space, you're redefining what inclusion is and what wellness looks like. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I think it is really important that we talk, health and wellness and plant medicine in communities across the country, and not the least of which communities that are of color. I think it's really important that we're bringing this to them in a different way than maybe some people have seen before. I'm hoping that it will do a lot for people's access to wellness.
Yeah, as you were speaking, what was going through my mind is how do I even articulate this? It's we assume that the same message works for everybody.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case.
It's not.
It sounds silly when you say it like that, but that's really what business has been doing. Especially, I would presume. I was in Oregon. I'm in South Florida now, but so we watched legalization happening and all of that. And my guess is that the messaging and the way that industry moved forward was not actually speaking to everybody.
Yeah, I definitely, in doing, prepping for Josephine Billie's, we did a lot of conversations with people, and I found that access and education, I think, were the biggest things that people were lacking, at least within this community. Education in regards to basically all parts of the plant, really. Being able to have a better understanding than this is just to get you high. And access in regards to, even though we're the oldest market really in the country, safe, legal, tested cannabis is a different beast than a lot of people were used to, and understanding, the value of that, the benefits of that, was really important for people to even, be able to change their customer behavior from places that they were purchasing from before to switching over to using us.
Right. And I know where you're at, but for everybody that's listening or watching, please tell us where you're tuning in from.
So I am at Josephine Billie's. We're located at 1535 West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in beautiful South Los Angeles.
And I love the name, honoring two iconic women in history, and it's embodying creativity, resilience, rebellion. It's like such an incredible, really powerful symbol. So what first inspired you to create the space in the brand?
I think I was definitely inspired by those two women. Josephine Baker and Billie Holiday were both persecuted for cannabis consumption, and yet they used their art to fight against injustice. They rejected the mainstream and they wrote their own rules, all while holding the door open for others who would come after them. And for us, that was the goal. How can we bring this vibe into the pending legalization that we were looking at in California? We went rec legal in 2018. We opened up actual ability to open new dispensaries in 2019. And for me, it was really important to be able to give some sort of service to my community, number one, because I think that it's, incredibly important that everyone has access to plant medicine. Um, and outside of that, I really wanted to be a part of educating people. Personally, I have a really roundabout way I came to cannabis. I actually didn't use cannabis growing up. I didn't use it in high school. I didn't use it in college. Nancy Reagan told me to say no to drugs. I didn't think that she would lie to me like that.
Right.
So I was like, absolutely not. You're not going to get me. And what ended up happening for me is I had a doctor after I had anxiety attacks or whatever, and ended up rushing myself to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack. My doctor started giving me different anxiety meds and I didn't like any of them. And so my doctor was like, hey, have you thought of cannabis? And I was like, you're trying to put me on drugs.
Right.
But what it did was it made me do my research. And I did that on two sides. Number one, learning about the plant. What is cannabis? What is THC? What is CBD? What's my endocannabinoid system? How does this really work? And I was able to do that and really be able to find myself relief in a way that I did not have to take prescription medications. But what I realized is the other side of that is that I had to do the research on why I felt that way. Why did I feel so negative about cannabis? Why was I so scared? Why did I feel like this was something that was illicit and wrong? Whereas, in the 1920s, cannabis was more widely used than Tylenol. So there's definitely been a culture shift around this plant, and I really had to educate myself out of it. And once I had that opportunity to do so, I was like, well, I need to tell everybody, because I thought that all these other people were they couldn't be lying to me about all of these things. But really, I realized that I was incredibly misinformed. I used to work in the entertainment industry. I know what we used to show as people who consumed cannabis. They were lackluster, non sitting on the couch, melting into nothingness, sort of, this is your brain on drugs. And it did take some time for me to, find out that the Sotu women were using cannabis in childbirth in the 1400s. And the history of this plant going back so far, and the very concentrated and deliberate act of demonizing it, because that's what happened. People decided, well, not just people, Harry Anslinger and his cohort decided that, we were going to attach this to jazz, to Black and brown people, and to make it something that felt, illicit and wrong. So it literally went to something everybody was doing, to something that everyone was afraid of. And it takes, us doing the educational work to understand that this is powerful plant medicine, that is a tool in an arsenal that people can use and feeling comfortable enough to do so.
It's interesting. It's both learning and unlearning.
Simultaneously.
Exactly.
Simultaneously.
So, and this is perfect, right? This conversation is exactly why I was really excited to get to speak with you. This is part of the Conscious Solutions podcast, where we explore how visionary founders use purpose, creativity, and community to build lasting impact. And we keep it relaxed. This is real. It's very authentic, casual. If there's anything that you want cut afterwards, just let me know. That's not a problem. And how I'd like the flow to go is we'll start with your story. We kind of already got into that a little bit. What sparked Josephine and Billie's. We'll move into where the company is today, how it's growing, explore maybe some of the challenges and opportunities that you're finding in the space now. And then at the end, I'd love to hear a little bit about your vision for the future.
All righty.
How's that sound?
Sounds fantastic.
Great. So, welcome everybody. You're watching or listening to the Conscious Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Barclay, and today we're joined by Whitney Beatty, founder and CEO of Josephine Billie's, a first of its kind dispensary and community hub inspired by the jazz age and built for women of color. Whitney's story is one of courage, culture, and conscious business, transforming an idea into a movement that redefines wellness, ownership, and empowerment. So thank you so much, Whitney, for being here. The couple of minutes that we've been talking already, it's just a pleasure. I know that this is going to be a great conversation. And so I guess maybe what was the birth story, right? You were sharing a little bit about where you personally were coming from, but what's the birth story of Josephine and Billie's? And what was the moment or experience that planted the seed for this vision?
That is a really good question because, part of it is the same, my story of coming to cannabis. And I think what ended up happening is as legalization happened and these opportunities started, I was like, what would be really nice if there was a dispensary that could give me more information on the plant. Because to be sure, there were dispensaries in Los Angeles. We've had them for a long time. However, they weren't necessarily always places that you wanted to hang out in. There are places that felt a little shady with the blacked out windows, and you kind of get in there. And I think that there was a pressure, even for me, and I was still already working in the cannabis space, but there's a pressure when you get up to the counter to know what you want, and to understand what your needs are. And if you ask the bud tender a question, you get these, oh, well, this is that fire. But what is that fire to that person doesn't necessarily mean it's the fire to me as a 40-something mother, or to someone else that comes in. There are so many different parts of understanding what works for you and what doesn't in cannabis. How do I make that easier? How do I make that more accessible for people? And on top of that, I had read an article that was talking about medical access and stress with women, and in particular women of color. What it was saying is basically women are the most stressed cohort out there, and of women of color are the most stressed cohort out there, and yet we have the least access to healthcare. When we do have access to healthcare, what has been shown is the doctors don't necessarily believe what we're saying. And when we get prescriptions, we might not be able to afford them. And yet, as the most stressed cohort out there, there's nobody out there having conversations with women of color about, hey, have you tried cannabis? Have you thought about cannabis? About ways that it can lower your anxiety, about ways that it can give you pain relief, about ways that it can, deal with a lot of things in life that might, reduce people's need for other over-the-counter or prescription medications. And so I figured if no one else was ready to have the conversation, why don't I? I knew what it had done for me, and I knew how a 180 that I did from believing that that weed was a drug that bad kids did behind the school in middle school. And so I was like, how do I attract a cohort or a group of customers that are thinking like me? And at the same time, I was looking at the stories of the 1920s and 30s, especially tea-pads. Tea-pads, which is what the store is based on, were places then that people would come to consume cannabis, listen to jazz music, have alcohol. But I also thought it was really interesting that it was really a mixed crowd. So you could have black people, white people, all sorts of people together in these tea-pads. And they also had big conversations about everything from segregation and the things that they were dealing with to poetry and literature. And it really was a place to be free and speak about big ideas And that's kind of what I would like to have brought to my community. And so we set about trying to build that. Mm.
It's amazing. I mean, and I love the like I'm sitting here thinking like, man, I want a place like that. Like where can I go and hang out and explore big
Well,
ideas and, you know,
it's funny because I think that initially, and still, I built this as an idea that this is going to be a place, that women of color feel free and welcome. Um, but that does not mean that my whole customer base is women of color. As a matter of fact, it's not. I think I still have more white men that walk in my door than anything, and it's because by tailoring what I think that they want, I'm tailoring to what a whole group of people wanted, which is more education about the plant. Everything that we have on our wall, we make sure that we have a terpene profile for. What we learned is that terpenes are more indicative of how the plant is going to make you feel than almost anything else. And the words sativa, indica, and hybrid really don't tell you much about how that plant is going to treat you. But if I know that something has myrcene in it, I know that it might give me some relaxation, might be able to help with sleep, whereas something with limonene is going to be able to give me some uplifted feelings, or terpinolene is great when I need energy to vacuum the whole house. And being able to not only give customers that information, but making sure that I have a staff that's ready to have those conversations. It's not, about what's that fire. It's like, what's your goal? What are you trying? Because people are coming in. Some people are here for pain relief. Some people want to be able to relax after a hard day of work. Some people want to have, fun on the weekend. And we can do all of those things through cannabis. And we just need to know what that ultimate goal is to be able to talk people through it. And so as we open and they're like, I got guys coming in here, it's like, all you need is TVs. We'd hang out here all day. Can we watch the game in the back? I'm like, and so I really appreciated that. By designing for this cohort, I was able to really help a larger group of people who still wanted that information and still give that comfort level to these women of color who can see themselves, pictured in, the art on the walls.
so what's it been like to turn this dream, this vision into a reality, especially in an industry that hasn't always made room for, the diversity of voices?
I mean, it's been a war zone. I mean, operating a cannabis business is not the easiest thing in the world. I will say that. We are working in a highly regulated market on a highly taxed, commodity. And there are lots of things that need to be overcome. I think for us, it was really about being able to decide what direction are we going in? Because back in those days, 2019, I think that everybody thought that the next round of cannabis was cannabis stores that looked like Apple stores, and everybody wanted that sort of experience. And so we kind of went to the left, and we designed a store that kind of looked like your grandma's back room, and we wanted it that way so people would have that comfort level, so we could have people. We use the back of our store for educational, events. So I teach a class called Tea and Terpenes, where we literally serve high tea. And we talk about the plant. It's a 2-hour class. The first hour is just about the history of the plant. Let's learn together. I have this huge timeline on our wall that's museum quality, that is like taking us literally from the 1400s all the way up through legalization in California, so we can really talk about what that journey is, and then have the conversation about how to best shop. How do you shop in a dispensary? What should you be asking for? What really matters? Why shouldn't I go in telling people I just want to, smoke a sativa or just smoke a indica? How should you be approaching this? And by doing that work, what we've learned is, I think that the customer is eager for information about how to make this plant work better for them. And I think that we as an industry, to a certain extent, do a disservice by not educating them about the plant, the endocannabinoid system, what THC and CBD really is, why these terpene profiles do make a difference. Because if you have people who are coming in like, oh, I just want to smoke an indica, that doesn't mean what you think it means. In this world where the plants have been cultivated so much and crossed so much, there are very, 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 very few true indicas or true sativas. Like, I probably see one or two a year. And I own a dispensary. I see the testing. I see what's actually coming out. And because we have a clientele that still believes that that is the case. And on top of that, um, we still have an industry on its face that is not regulated in those ways, i.e., so if I have a blue dream and you have a blue dream, those plants could be completely different, but we're both calling them blue dream. In the state of California, they are actually working now to work with cultivators and to really be able to do some genotyping of what makes this, what makes this, because unfortunately what ends up happening is you come in and you're like, I want, a blue dream that is, what you're used to smoking. And I could give you something that is completely different, but it has that same name. So you can't make your decisions based on that name. You need to make your decisions based on what is that terpene profile going on in there, what's actually happening in this plant. Because what we know from, the research on cultivation, all these things can change how this plant grows and what it's giving you. Is it indoor or is it outdoor? Did you harvest it in the morning or at night? Was it dewy out? All these things can affect it. So we have to be able to lean on something that is universal. And I think that's going to end up being testing.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting to think about uh, the progression of the industry and the progression of technology and testing so that you can even drill down and get, this. It was funny as you're talking, I was remembering like, oh yeah, the way that I knew the difference was indica was couch.
And that's what, to this day, that's what people believe. Like,
Exactly.
and indica or sativa, you want to be bubbly and all of these things. And then when they get that, and buy that indica and it doesn't give them the effect that they expect,
Right.
then it's this newfangled cannabis is too much, or this newfangled cannabis
Yeah.
is confusing. And it's not necessarily that's the case. It's that you don't know what you're asking for. You don't know what to ask for. And you don't know how to verbalize the needs that you have. And that's why we need to work as an industry to educate our customer base.
So how does it look today? How does Josephine and Billie's look today? How has the mission evolved as you've grown?
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we were so lucky, and it's funny that I'm talking to you today, which is the 30th of October, because on the 29th of October, which was yesterday, was actually our the fourth anniversary of us having been open. So we have now, we're standing 4 years strong in this community. And I think that we have become a part of the community, and I really take a lot of pride in that. A lot of people were telling me, oh, you should have opened this dispensary, on the west side, or, with a higher, people with a higher median income, et cetera, et cetera. And I really did feel that it was important to be able to serve within the community that I was living in, and really have people understand that you don't have to drive all the way across town in order to get this sort of attention, this sort of customer service, and this sort of care about the way in which you consume. If someone walks into here and they walk out feeling safe, feeling cared for, and with a product that they're excited about, I think for me, that's a win. And they come out of here learning more about cannabis than they knew walking in, because I've got people who are bringing their grandmothers, who are bringing their aunts, people who don't want to feel, a euphoric high. And that is fine. We serve everybody, and we definitely work hard to make sure that we have a diversity of products, so that if you want to feel pain relief without feeling high, we've got something for you for that. We've got creams, we've got tinctures, we've got patches. So I think that in a lot of ways we changed what the community looks like, and what the community expectations are from, a dispensary. And then the other side of that is, what we've been able to give back. We have events like First Sundays where we would have small businesses that, did not have a storefront. We would basically have a fair outside and let people set up booths for free and sell to our customer base. We've done so many crossover events with people from the community, bringing in senior citizens, bringing in LGBTQ plus people. We've celebrated Black History Month and Latino History Month and Asian American Heritage Month, and all those things. In order to celebrate at the end of the day our customer, because they look like everyone. They look like, Los Angeles, and I want everybody to feel seen and to be heard. And it's hard to do that for everyone, but we try to do the best that we can, because I think it's important. And the same reason why we try our best to sell, to carry products that are made by Black, brown, women-led, LGBTQ-led companies, because those are the companies that are having the hardest time finding shelf space. And I think yet it so represents who our community is, and I want them to have an opportunity to shine.
Wow. I think all I can say to that is thank you. I mean,
I'm lucky.
really.
I'm so lucky that, the community has embraced us. I'm so lucky that they saw this little, cannabis shop in a shopping center and really, told their friends and told their family. And we really got to grow organically. It wasn't like it wasn't the field of dreams. It wasn't, if we open it, it will come. I was like, because I was peeking out the door and no one's coming. How do we get them to come?
Right.
And it really became, our success came from the people who started coming here and then told everybody that they knew, that, because the other part of it is that we do make sure that over 80% of our products out there are priced $50 or less, because we want it to be affordable. It does not help to have a dispensary in community in an urban area if no one who lives in that urban area can afford to purchase things there.
Right.
So we always make sure, what do I have that someone can buy for $5? What do I have someone can buy for $10? In the same way that people understand, I think clearly in the alcohol space, that there's a difference between pop off in a plastic bottle and Grey Goose, that's top shelf. Those are still the differences that we have in cannabis as well. We got something for every price point, and being able to, serve not just the high end customer, but the customer who is looking for, what's this $5 going to do for me? I think that we meet people where they are.
Aw. Do you see your work as part of a larger social or cultural transformation around wellness or representation?
I do. I do. At the end of the day, communities of color have been disproportionately disenfranchised by the war on drugs for years. And so in legalization, I do think it's important that we have a place, in this industry. That's why I wanted to start this company. That's why I wanted to start this business. But I also think that I feel an obligation to educate that audience in particular, because as much as the war on drugs was difficult across the board, I think that there's something special with, my mother's, my mother's cohort of people who saw their communities be torn apart by the war on drugs. My mother was like, have you lost your mind? You're going to open a dispensary. You have 3 degrees and you're going to quit your job and sell drugs. You've lost your mind, And so I really did have to go through and have all these conversations with her. And afterwards, I was really able to get her to she had bursitis, and I was able to get her to use the creams and the tinctures or whatever for pain relief. And it really did change her. And then all of a sudden she's telling all of her friends. And I think that even by that small experience, I realized that there's so many people within my community that have an unhealthy fear of plant medicine.
Yeah.
And yet, it's funny because they have that fear there, but in other areas, people are understanding why it's so important to, eat whole foods and buy organic and all of those things. But in cannabis, I don't think that that necessarily always comes across. I tell people all the time because people are like, oh, I don't like sun grown cannabis. I only like indoor cannabis. I'm like, well, no one ever comes to the grocery store and says, I only want those GMO tomatoes. Please give me the GMO tomatoes that were grown under a light that's never been outside, please. I'm like, that's not, we can see in that situation that that's not the best idea. Um, and in the same way, I believe, because I'm a huge fan of sun grown cannabis, that's what California does really well. We grow outdoor cannabis, and it is fantastic, and it has the most diverse amount of cannabinoids in it, and we've got THC and CBD, and that I'd take that any day over some of the more engineered strains that are out there that are being grown indoors. And that is the sort of, I want to see people having those sort of conversations. And in order for us to get there, we need to have an educated, community. So that's the conversations that we're starting to have here, and hopefully we'll continue to facilitate within our community.
I'm sure that you're going to be very successful in
Thank you. Let's hope.
that. So, even like mission-driven businesses, kind of the change maker businesses, growth brings its own set of challenges, right? What's the hardest
Yeah.
part of scaling that in growing your business that you've experienced?
I mean, I think in this industry, unfortunately, it's always about cash and cash flow. It's difficult within the cannabis space because at the end of the day, we're still federally illegal. What does that mean for us on a day and date basis? It means that it's hard for us to bank. It makes it hard for us to, we do have a bank account, but I pay $1,500 a month just in fees, outside of everything else. So being able to have the money to scale effectively is difficult. We're stuck in a world where you can't get an SBA loan. I can't go down and, talk to the people at B of A, regardless of how good my credit is. You can only raise money from investors and VCs, really. But that's where this cash is coming from. And unfortunately, angel investors tend to invest in people that remind them of themselves. And most of them are, 60 plus year old white men who might not see themselves as a 40 something Black single mother. So there is a disconnect there that needs to be bridged. And the other side of that is VCs, and VCs are giving only 2% of their money to women led businesses. And when it comes to women of color led businesses, that number takes a deep dive to 0.3%. And so being able to get the money to grow, to scale is difficult. And being able to stretch yourself through growing pains. And it's so funny because when people used to say, oh, opening the business is easy, growth and scale is hard. I'm like, please, that's going to be the easy part. And now I completely understand what they're talking about, because on top of all of that, we have the largest tax burden out there. We're paying more taxes than tobacco and alcohol combined. And those taxes hit us on a monthly basis. At the end of every month, I'm writing large checks or what have you. So with that and the high prices of compliance, it's easy to say those words. So what that really means is, I can't just have a security guard that I hire. I need to hire an outside security firm that is going to meet these criteria, and that's going to cost me extra money. I know that I'm going to have people who are doing specific jobs within the track and trace area. So we're being compliant to our metric requirements. We can only use POS systems that can connect with these back end systems, which means that we need to use a more expensive POS than someone else who's using, the Square back end or whatever. I'm paying more in credit card fees and debit fees because of it. So and we pay more when it comes to leasing and getting property. And I mean, it's an astronomical difference. I have, friends who own a regular flower shop who are paying, $3,000, $6,000 a month for their space. And I know people who own a dispensary that is the same size and are paying $30,000 a month because yes, $30,000 a month. to be in, and not the most desirable neighborhoods. This is not Beverly Hills. This is, South Central. But because there is a perception that people in cannabis have a ton of money, there is a definite, cannabis bump, plus, all the insurance things. So all of those become a heavy burden for operators to be able to get out from under. And then the federal government has 280E, which says that anything that is sold that is federally illegal cannot deduct any business expenses, which means I can't deduct not my payroll, not my overhead, not my leasing, not my equipment, nothing. So we're getting hit left, right, and center. In the city of Los Angeles, we're paying more than 40% in taxes that I'm passing along to my customer. So what does that mean on the overall? It means that it makes it more attractive to a customer to continue to buy from illicit operators,
Right.
because they're not going to, they can walk out of there, they spend $100, they got $100 worth of product. When you get $100 worth of product from me, you're going to walk out at $140. And so we have to really make sure that we have people understand what the value proposition that we have is. And so those have been the things that have been the biggest challenges for us moving forward. And I realized that as much as I would love to just be a person who operates a dispensary, it's the onus is on me to make sure that I'm being clear with my regulators and my politicians how the choices that they're making are affecting us in the industry, and where if your ultimate goal is to get people into the legal market, this is what's going to be necessary, and this is what's needed in order for these businesses to survive and thrive. I'm like, we're not selling plutonium, we're selling plant medicine. I'm like, it can't be that hard. So hopefully that
Yeah.
answers your question.
Man, and to hear it framed that way, it's like, yeah, those are some hurdles.
it, I'm like, people always ask me, would you do it again? And I would, but I would definitely like to whisper in my ear about, you have no idea what's coming for you. And the funny part is that no one really did, because this is also a new market, where it's a
Right.
new
Yeah,
market
it's
with new
evolved.
regs,
Yeah.
and we continue to evolve on a monthly basis. I mean, things are changing rapidly. We had a tax increase in July, from 15% excise tax went to 19% excise tax. And in the top of October, it rolled back, because of fast action and incredible lobbying and pervasive work from this industry. We were able to get back to 15%, because 15% is super high already. But it's, you have to be at the forefront of all these things, because everything changes daily, and we have to let people know how this affects us, not just as a social equity business, because that we are one of those, but as small business. And do we want the cannabis market to be something, a place where small business can survive and thrive? And I think that we do. I think that plant medicine, and its roots, comes from people who really care about healing and really care about the plant that they're growing, and they really do deserve an opportunity to be successful. And I don't want to see this become an industry where it's like tobacco, and RJ Reynolds runs everything and the small guy doesn't have a space to grow. And in order for us to make sure that that happens, we have to make sure that we're staying involved civically, in the ways that these industries are set up and built.
Well, and I hope that Florida takes some notes from what you just shared.
Yeah.
When you think about how information or decision making flows through your organization,
Mhm.
for you there, from your team to your community partners, what feels streamlined and what still feels like a bit heavier or manual or challenging to get across?
I think now, 4 years in, a lot of our compliance is streamlined. I think that, my team is clear on what the regulations are and what's required of them in the way that we operate, even if it's, how we take in deliveries, how we work with our back end metric and seed to sale compliance stuff. What continues to be things that we have to discuss and, can sometimes be roadblocks is product. Because, I think it's incredibly important that we're serving our customer base. When we started this, I was serving a dreamed customer base, but I didn't know who was really going to walk through our doors. Now, 4 years in, we've got a much better idea of who's coming here on an everyday basis. Are we serving their best interests? As new things come on the market, are we seeing them? Can we figure out how to make it make sense for our customer base at a price point that makes sense? What are the new innovations that are coming in? We definitely always have a push and pull, internally about, what we should be carrying and what's next in that regard. We get excited about, products that we think that are awesome that we know that we can bring into the customer at a good price. We're here cheering for whatever a great $2 pre-roll because I know that the customer will really appreciate those sort of deals, or something that's coming from an amazing regenerative farm, and I think that those arguments or those conversations that we have internally mean that we have more diversity on our walls, because there's always people who will stand out. We've got to take this, we've got to take that. And I've also learned the hard way on the other side of that is that everything I like doesn't mean that it's going to sell. The fact that I like it doesn't make it magic. I'm not indicative of every person who comes in the door, but I'd like to think that we have, through my staff, a good representation of what that customer base is looking for. And so I have to listen to them.
So I've got two more questions for you.
Okay.
Where do you see the future going for you and your tea pad there?
Ooh. That's a good question. I mean, from the beginning, our goal was to have this be a flagship, to be able to understand, what the community needs were and to be able to grow. So what we're seeing now is we've done some really fun things. We've launched our MILF line of products where we're having our own pre-rolls and we have our own plant or what have you. We've been, selling things into other dispensaries, which has been exciting. And then I think that we're also standing on the forefront of where this industry is going next. And I take a lot of pride in that, through my work as I'm on the executive board of the Black Los Angeles Cannabis Council, which is made up of Black Los Angeles licensees. I'm also vice president of the Cannabis Equity Retailers Association, made of retail employees. I also sit and serve as vice president of Supernova Women. We're a 501c3 that seeks to encourage women to become stakeholders in the cannabis space. And we're working hard to support both equity and small businesses. So what I've really learned, besides all the things that I, have done in the cannabis space is that our work is never done and that we need to make sure that we are out here letting our regulators I've held the signs in front of the governor's house. I've done so much public speaking on the state and the local level. I have authored white pages with policy suggestions. And sat down with a good number of the city council people from Los Angeles. If you would have told me 10 years ago that's what I would be doing in my spare time, I'd be like, you sound crazy. But this is, literally what I spend my extra time doing, because I think that it's important. It's important not just for the customer, but it's important for the communities that have these stores within them, because as much as people sometimes feel, I don't know if I want a dispensary in my area. I always challenge them because what the data says is that areas are safer when dispensaries are there. Why? Because I have a whole bunch of regulations I have to follow. I got a guy outside who's checking IDs, and he has a gun on his hip. I've got more cameras than your local Target. I've got all these things that make my community, look nicer. We have regulations. I can't even let spray paint stay on the building. If someone was to tag it, we need to cover that up within 48 hours. This is a space where they definitely put the onus on us to make sure, I can get a violation for having trash flying around in my parking lot. So yes, you might think that this is not what you want in your community, but I bet bottom dollar that there's no one else who's taking more care than us, because I don't want to take those stiff penalties. So how do we build a bridge between um, what we're doing here and what the community needs, and how can we move forward together? To me, that's what I would like to see me doing, and I've been enjoying both doing the push into the regulatory work and being able to partner with regulatory agencies to make sure that the laws make sense, and also being able to teach the next generation of cannabis business owners best practices, and at least make it easier for them to move forward than it was for us.
Wow. Whitney for president.
And like I get no pleasure from it. Took us 2.5 years to get our dispensary open. It cost us $250,000 of just holding fees. And I take no joy in anyone else having to have it be that difficult when we can, definitely explain, what the challenges were and how we've gotten around them. And now, we've got enough people in this industry that you can pick up the phone and say, "Hey, how should I be processing my credit cards? What makes sense there? How do I bring in funds? How do I talk to investors?" We've done these things. We know these things now, and we've got to do the work to share it.
So my last question for you
Okay.
is there anything that we haven't covered today? Anything maybe about Josephine and Billie's or the industry or even yourself personally? Like any message you want to share with anybody who's watching or listening?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that the most important thing that I tell people, especially in markets that are just coming online or newly emerging, is that it's really important that you're showing up at these city council meetings where they're making these decisions, as they're deciding what these ordinances, are going to do and what they're going to require. And I say that because people, understand how important it is to show up to vote for the president or show, those sort of things. But your life is more affected by the things that are going on in your local municipality. A good example of that is in the city of Los Angeles. They had a requirement that in order to apply for a cannabis license, you had to hold property and you had to show that you had this property. They wanted to see a lease and the check that you wrote to these people. So we had to actually have property to apply. But as I said, it took 2.5 years. They went through lots of delays and issues within the city. And because they had that requirement, that meant that everyone, they were offering 100 licenses. 800 people applied. That meant 800 people went out and held property and paid money. That means that within this equity program, and to be sure, equity is the idea that, communities of color have been most disproportionately harmed and thus deserve, access in legalization. So you're saying these are the people who have been harmed by the war on drugs. Um, we want to make it easier. And what they ended up doing is draining everybody's investments because of course, they didn't plan on the hold. They didn't know that there was going to take that long. But because we did not see that coming, we didn't know what the ramifications of that was. Millions of dollars were lost. Millions of dollars were wasted from the people who least had them to give. And if we would have known, we could have argued about that way before we got to that point. We should have talked about it in the ordinances. We should have talked about it as this program was being built. And that's why I think that especially people from Los Angeles feel so strongly about sharing our insights and knowledge with, people who are coming online. We're talking to the people in Missouri and Minnesota, looking at New York and New Jersey and saying, please learn the lessons that we learned, and make sure that you guys are showing up and being very verbal about what you want to see in this industry. Do you want to see this as a space where big tobacco and big pharma are going to be the people who decide which strains that you're going to smoke and what you're going to consume? Or do you want this to be something for people who, have been legacy farmers and growers within this community? That's the difference maker.
Yeah. Get engaged.
Get engaged. Listen, I'm like, just show up and tell people that this matters to you. It makes more of a difference than you know.
Whitney, thank you so much. I feel like I got an education just in this conversation. And I also feel like I'm somebody that's pretty well educated in in these realms. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So, it's a beautiful journey getting to share that, what you're doing with Josephine and Billie's. You're not only leading a company, you're helping shape a more inclusive and conscious industry.
That's
So,
what I hope.
I wish you the best of luck and all the success in the world.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Have a great one.
Yeah, thank you too. Thanks for tuning in to the Conscious Solutions podcast. We appreciate you being here and being part of the movement to support people who help the people. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to the channel and follow us on our social media. This way you can stay updated on upcoming episodes and the community happenings. And if you're a founder, a practitioner, or someone who's doing meaningful work in the wellness space and you'd like to share your story, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay grounded and keep building with purpose.